Before founding Groundlab, he has practiced in several architectural offices and institutions in Mexico City, Madrid, and London, where he has concentrated in architectural and urban design projects like the Olympic Master Plan for 2012. At Groundlab, he has won and developed several competitions, workshops, exhibitions, and projects, including winning entry for Longan City International Competition Master Plan and the newly opened International Horticultural Exposition in Xi'an, China. Alfredo, as you heard, is the co-director of the Landscape Urbanism Design Master at the Architectural Association and director of the AA Visiting School in Mexico City. Welcome, Alfredo.
Hola, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here, and I hope that this presentation and the work I produce is helpful and contributes to the conference. I see many coincidences and many ideas throughout the whole morning that I found very interesting and very relevant, and you will find in my presentation that somehow it will be some coincidence with what we believe as architects. Anyway, I've been exploring the realm of landscape urbanism in the past 10 years as a student, as a tutor, and as a professional. And I believe that landscape urbanism is quite interesting because it allows me, and I think it can allow architects and designers in general to redefine our role and our agency within environments in general. I think this is something that will allow us as well to make a greater impact in the way we approach all the projects and all the problems that everybody here is posing forward. And because of that, I think we have a really strong transdisciplinary approach. Many people already mentioned that word, but it's something that for us help us to find interest in a specific type of projects. Of course, the work that you're going to see here is a combination of efforts from geographers, geomorphologists, critical thinkers, architects, landscape architects, engineers. But all of them are in the search of a very specific type of projects that will allow us to redefine that role and that agency that I'm talking about. I have divided the presentation in two parts. The first part will basically pose three questions, which is why are we interested in this type of practice? The second will be what are we doing about that? And the third will be how are we doing that, or which tools are we using to develop that? And finally, the second part will be expanding on a specific project, which although it's not based in the Americas in general, I think is something, or is a project that will show, hopefully, what I believe could be the role of architects and how they can impact in wider territories. The projects that I will be showing, they can be framed under something that I call territory as a design praxis. Territory is something, or is the lenses through which we build the landscape. I'm going to leave it like that because this could be part of a wider theoretical kind of explanation of why we think territory is the lenses of that landscape that we've been talking about. But I hope that the projects and the examples I will show will explain that in further detail. So why are we interested in this type of projects? What we are interested in is basically to engage ourselves into contemporary conditions, into tackling contemporary conditions. We live in a world that is framed by exponential world population, no? Which is basically driving a ruthless urbanization of the world. We now live in what is so-called the urban age, the majority of the people live in cities, in metropolis, and we've been told that as architects, or in general as designers, we should focus on those cities, on those metropolis. We should design the best and most sustainable buildings that are located in those cities, without realizing that actually, in order to build those cities, countless resources and energy are required to fill this urbanization, in the form of this kind of productive territories that you see in the screen, the vast mining and agricultural landscapes of the world. Along this line, we have seen, at least in the past 2 centuries, an expanded effort to control natural resources in an optimized manner, not only to use and distribute them, but to maximize the generation of profit. Alongside these mega engineering projects and the aspiration for an efficient control of the environment and its resources, there has been the unintentional provocation of the so-called natural disasters, in which these rigid infrastructural systems have begun to collapse, as we can see in the images in here and as we can see in the news constantly. But inversely, other regions are experiencing massive drought because of these resources overexploitation. We now live, and that we know, in a digitally interconnected world. We transfer data, information, money. A great chunk of the population can move around the world freely, but it's important to emphasize that this sort of interconnected digital world is not digital only, it's material. Huge part of the world has been impacted in a direct or indirect way by this urbanization process. And there are actually some attempts to kind of tackle this interest that we have, these contemporary conditions. There exist out there conventions, treaties, policies from other professions, from other disciplines that are actually writing a number of documents which basically translate regulations, laws, ideas on how to coordinate these problems that I mentioned before, but not from a design point of view. And I believe in the research and the work that we produce, and what I will show, the designers could actually have an impact, and we can be included in the conversations of this type of documents or projects. So what are we doing about this? On the one hand, I run a program at the Architectural Association, which is called Landscape Urbanism, in which what we do there is actually we speculate about how, as architects, we can tackle the issues that I just mentioned. For example, there is a project that was developed in the master program called Flooding Mechanisms. This project contrasts current large-scale managerial approaches of water control in Europe, specifically the north part of Spain, which are directed toward the management of water resources and its associated landscapes, such as rivers and the adjacent agricultural lands. What you see in this image is the contrast of the river Arga in 2003 in its associated agricultural landscapes, and the same landscape in 2015. And you can see a huge change in the space, in the landscape, in the production landscape. And how this was caused. There was a policy that somebody said, well, we need a canal system that brought water from the Pyrenees. And the only people that can be irrigated in there are the people that owns a land bigger than 5 hectares. And so you have on the right-hand side the result of that policy. Design wasn't included. Designers didn't have a say. Policymakers produced this type of landscape. And I'm going to expand on the project, but through an incremental manipulation of the river and the beneficial understanding of its flooding capabilities, the project proposes a new form of occupation of the territory through design. A series of political entities, which are floodable islands, are introduced in order to manage and distribute water collectively, making use of microflooding as an alternative to diversify current technocratic conditions and expand on the spatial qualities they can provide to local people. Another example is this project called Projective Landscapes. In this project, the project deals with the idea of consequential or reciprocal landscapes in a similar way as defined by James Hutton, which many of you are familiar with. An example of this type of project is the exhaustion of the Aral Sea, or the disappearance, as depicted in this slide. Due to the overexploitation of its water resources for production of cotton industry that were fueled by Western clothing markets. The Aral Sea territory was led to a desertification processes in the broadest sense. This has produced not just lack of water, but the deterritorialization dynamics affecting existing inhabitants and forcing nearby cities such as Nupus to think their future. The disappearance of the Aral Sea is a direct consequence of the ruthless urbanization processes we now live in the urban age. Even though there are thousands of kilometers separating the markets and the origins of production, the material and physical consequences are clear and visible in a global scale. In this project, the students, they intervene within the nearby Nupus shrinking city, where shifting sands are moving over abandoned urban environments and existing productive grounds. The project attempts to choreograph dune formation as a way to resolve new settlements around preserved clusters, transforming their morphological conditions with the use of productive landscape dynamics in the form of agroforestry. And this intervention in the end negotiates desertification and productive environment as an alternative to Nupus shrinking condition into an inland desertified archipelago. Coastal future is yet another example of the challenges we face. This actual project challenge the current mentalities that exist in terms of flooding events and seeing them as problems in light of the current increasing of flooding and coastal erosion, in this case in the UK. The UK coastline, for example, in today, is seen by Britons as a fixed line, in which there's a need to defend and to present the land ownership of the territory. In contrast to this mentality, the Coastal Futures Project seeks to understand the dynamism of the coastline in order to use tidal forces to reshape this fixed line and provide alternatives that physically and socially adapt to the transformations. Here, flooding acts as an agent to influence the regional disparities of coastal towns in relation to London and bigger cities. This landscape you see in here, especially on the left, provoke decentralization and produce novel territorial configuration. In this case, a tidal creek slows down water movement and provides a new scaffolding for new local water-based economies to emerge. On the other hand, I have an office called Groundlab, which I run together with Clara Oloris. In Groundlab, what we do is we produce a range of projects that through commissions, self-initiatives, and competition attempt to engage in the similar type of projects with a wider territorial implications and, of course, with the limitations of real life. An example of this project is the one you see in the screen, which is a commission consultation we were asked to produce for the ravines, the barrancas, in the western part of Mexico City. We saw this project as an opportunity to basically expand the original scope of the project, which was a planning project, whereby peculiar hilly morphologies, which are the barrancas, and which are the last remnants of the natural landscapes in the city, could play a triggering role in the restructuring of the city in accordance with its wider geographical setting. The project stands in direct contrast, or in sharp contrast, to the current engineering mentalities in Mexico City, which see the import of water resources from faraway valleys and the generation of large-scale drainage systems as the only way forward. By using a prototypical approach, where each of the 32 ravines, which were part of the planning program, they can be understood as part of a wider hydrological system. Each ravine could potentially provide water collection, water infiltration to the aquifer, and water distribution to larger areas of the city. a city that is currently deprived of any water body on its surface could be provided with a hydrological network triggered by an existing and singular landscape, such as the Barrancas, that in turn can envision the radical transformation of the structure and infrastructure of the megacity, using its own local landscape and territorial conditions to the management of its intrinsic valid conditions. This project, I'm not going to expand on this one, because Arturo and Danilo made a great job in explaining that. I wanted to show this just because it also is part of the interest the office has, no? The type of projects which recovers the character of the city, as they explained, but also it's a project that enhances and focuses on the public space. No? A project that is not a private condition, is not a singular building, but it's a city that reestablishes and reconnects the citizens with the civic life of Santiago. So, how do we do this? There's a number of tools we occupy in our practice. One of them is cartography. I'm glad I've seen many cartographies throughout all presentations, because I believe cartography is a powerful tool to produce these territories that I'm talking about. We like to show this image, which of course many of you are aware of, which is the survey of the Mississippi River, because it basically portrays what we believe is the concept of territory. You can see the river dynamics on the one hand. You can see the grid that basically try to control and measure this territory. This is something really powerful because many of these cartographies that you've seen have modeled and changed our surroundings in different parts of the world. But in the Architectural Association and in Groundlab, we believe in them not only as a description of what is going on in the territories, but as an envision of what could happen in the future. We also use a lot of simulation devices and software that basically try to simulate landscapes from the morphological point of view, and this is something that we use to test realities, to test digitally how they can be impact real world. But the project that I'm going to show now in a bit more detail could actually explain how this can be deployed. This project is called Littoral Negotiations, and it's a project that is basically interested in that area between land and the sea. In the blur interface, the project is interested in both the geomorphological processes that occur in this zone, creating this kind of dynamic landforms that you see here, but also in the ways that people occupy is shifting landscapes, in which wet sand and sediment is the primary physical material. The project is located in the Mediterranean Sea, where sediment is in short supply, largely due to the damming of its many rivers. The sediment that does make it to the ocean flows via littoral cells along the coast, crossing the borders of 25 different nations and affecting almost 500 million people that live along the Mediterranean coast. This cross-political situation has forced numerous conflicts and cooperations in which any sand extraction or intervention within the coast will invariably have some impact on the downstream region. And yet, there exists no Mediterranean scale action framework or precedent in how to manage sediment, as exists with other important resources and issues such as the management of fisheries or the management of pollution on a Mediterranean scale. In the project, sediment is very interesting material, in the sense that ports want to get rid of it through dredging, but also it can be a very valuable resource. In the case of what you see in the screen, in Dubai, the sediment was dredged from Australia and relocated across the planet to create luxurious palm islands, which are in fact now sinking back into the sea to be redistributed according to the ocean currents. In this kind of rigid master plan development that I think that the project is trying, or the project that I'm going to show, is trying to provide an alternative to. We collaborate closely with the British Geological Survey in the UK, and from there we acquire a coastal evolution model, a cellular automata simulation tool, in which coastal processes can be tested, understanding how sediments flow along coastline, how an intervention within this might begin to alter the flow of sediments, and the beginning to develop of some control within this process. You can see in black, or the black lines that are interventions that the students produce to manipulate those geomorphological processes. The students also found this documentary, which is called Sound Wars, basically depict the illegal and legal movement around the world. So basically to build all those buildings that there is a short supply of sand, because the type of sand that we need for concrete is only located in coastal areas. And this is causing something that the documentary called Sound Wars, and it's actually producing many conflicts around the world. It's a very interesting documentary if you want to see it. But in order to basically tackle this issue in the Mediterranean Sea, the students create this atlas. It's an atlas that represents sediment shifting around the Mediterranean Sea, either to the process of long-shore drift or to the shipping network that exists. It highlighted a series of ports and lagoons which represent various sediment supplies within the region, especially coming from the Suez Canal expansion project. The Suez Canal project was seen as an starting point for other dredging projects around the Mediterranean Sea. The project focused on the Nile Delta littoral zone. At the territorial scale, humans have had a dramatic influence on the overall delta system. Having dammed the Nile River in the 1960s, the coastline is dramatically eroding, a condition exacerbated by a growing population requiring more arable land to feed itself. At the scale of the delta, this drawing documents the production system which fuels the growth of the fishing farming industry, in which fish farmed in the Lake Mansala supplies the big cities of the delta, such as Cairo. The delta condition of erosion can be observed on the one hand, in the left-hand side, to the concrete beaches of Alexandria, and on the other hand, the sinuous sandbars created from the eroding Nile River mouth at the Lake Mansala. These landscapes are consequences of the Aswan Dam construction. The condition of erosion can be observed here, in which over a period of 30 years, this coastal spit has formed as a direct result of construction of the Aswan Dam, which blocks sediments from ever arriving at the coast. You can also see that in more detail here in these aerial photos of the Lake Mansala, in which the change in the land is obvious, both in the creation of this coastal spit, but also the gradual filling up of the Lake Mansala, which is essentially happening throughout the interlinked process of sediment accumulation inside the lake and the growth of the fish farms industry. And this is a process that has happened in the last 30 years. In this image, in detail, you can see the area of Lake Mansala. What is interesting here is the sticks and net structures used by the fish farmers are literally forming over the time structures of their fish farms. And here, these drawings were produced to document how the process happened. On the left, you can see how the spit consolidates. It becomes subdivided into fishing enclosures, while on the right, the process is reversed, in which people and the construction of their fish pens allows for the eventual consolidation of the sediment. In these two cartographies, they seek to reveal both the geomorphological process patterns that exist through erosion and sedimentation, in which sediment is distributed along the coast from the river mouth, and conversely, sediment, how it arrives at the lake through a system of canals. And on the right, the social formation of different types of fish farms, ranging from more extensive to intensive growth models. And in this drawing, you can see in black the areas that are remaining in the Lake Mansala, which can be understood as the remaining public water. This is rapidly decreasing with the encroaching fish farms that exist. The diagram begins to describe some of the different types of settlement patterns, ranging from linear growth systems or radical ad hoc systems. Different types of groups and fisheries were documented, from the more extensive simple fish ponds to the hard wall, intense structure, and each of them various conflicts and negotiations between the different groups were discovered. So in here, the students, they depict what we call cartogenesis, which is basically describing how sediment can be move around the area. On the right, you can see sediment coming from dredging projects, and on the blue, illegal movement by the existing fish farmers. And this is a process that they wanted to coordinate to the project they were proposing. In order to do this, they represent moving sand speed through a catalog that was produced to understand the way the speed could grow along different angles, depending on the way structure were placed. Using the coastal evolution model that I mentioned earlier, the project tests different intervention patterns in a crude way. Here we can see the use of this structure to provoke the closure of the speed, or to deflect sediment, or catch sediment. There were different experiments done by the students in order to control and to design this geomorphological process. The pattern that was created, or that were created, became a guiding system in which the fish pen structure could be deployed, so as to begin to mount the movement of the sediment in a particular way. And this type of structures were directly influenced by the same type of construction techniques used in the Lake Mansala. The same pattern deployed at a large scale, alongside the deposition of sediment, is the gradual growth and expansion of the fish farms themselves. Units that are closer together might grow quicker, gradually growing into a fishing settlement. Although this process, the project looked very closely at how this coastal speed works, the direction in which it grows being influenced by the wave direction, the ability for it to have this kind of form influenced by wave refraction, how it develops a series of subspines, and within them, even a smaller version of the same process. Looking both at the aerial photos of the speed and understanding how it works through simulation, the project established a set of design parameters which could provide the guidelines on how the speed could be deployed. This rule translated into a kind of shifting scenario. The fish pen structures form a skeleton in which sediment is gradually accumulated or possibly eroded. In here, the speed could gradually grow and evolve based on sediment supply within the region over a period of 50 years. In certain areas, the speed might begin to enlarge, forming the ground for a village, or conversely, with reduced supplies, form the basis for a larger, more extensive fish pond. In here, you can see the whole suite of different scales of production of fisheries that might begin to make use of the speed, ranging from the more intensive fish farms with the hard wall enclosures and necessity for more infrastructure to the larger and simpler extensive fish ponds. These studies inform the way the speed might be guided by the fish pen structure towards an existing village, which in turn, due to the creation of a shadow zone, has begun to grow out in the opposite direction. On how this system, the same situation might work at the same smaller scale. Sediment was deflected or accumulated using the same system. This was also derived from the careful underworks. And in here you can see what the resulting condition of the evolution of these fish pens might look like, and how from differential initial conditions could evolve into different clusters of building and podiums between fish pens. And this in turn would have an influence on the overall speed formation. You can also see here a variety of different scales of fish ponds, ranging from the more extensive ponds at the back to the more intensive ponds at the front. In here you can start to see perhaps how the project is not a mega infrastructural urbanism, but something more emergent. Perhaps it's something that we can construct through a construction kit, no? That could be the setup of a policy-driven design program that could be implemented over time. In the video at the bottom, you can see how the sedimentation occurs over time through the fish pens that were inserted, and on the top you can see the production of this particular landscape. Finally, I would like to conclude with and to come back to the larger scale, because I start with showing how the project started with the production of a cartography that depicts how sediment moves around the Mediterranean, and how this project could actually be a prototype for different areas in there, but at the same time it could produce a cartography that through design could choreograph and coordinate the movement of sediments, but only through the specific understandings of local conditions, such as the Lake Mansala. Thank you very much.